Good morning. I haven't taken a school assembly in 10 years. And you kind of get that imposter syndrome, don't you, when people in the room or kids in the assembly don't say good morning back to you. And usually a strategy for that is to pick on the naughtiest and just say good morning. So I'll try it again, shall we? Good morning. Thank you. I feel much more involved right now. What an absolute privilege it is for me to be here today among so many of our CEO Network members and our colleagues from Forum Strategy and from our partners at Forum Strategy. And I hope it is going to be a really special day. And what I want to get out of it is some joy in connecting with colleagues who share the same values, the same mindsets, the same challenges. So I want us to enjoy the day. But I also want us to take some comfort from the fact that we are among supportive colleagues who are facing the same challenges for us, but also to have courage and take courage from the fact that collectively, as Alice and Maggie have said, we are stronger together, we are strong as a network, and collectively we can meet the challenges that face us. And very much that's going to be my message today. Many of you will know that this is the first year in 10 years that I've not started as a chief executive. Let me tell you, the 1st of September was a joy, an absolute joy. Apart from my partner knocking on my bedroom door at 7:30 going, "Are you getting up?" And the answer was, "No, bugger off, I'm not." But it's undoubtedly, the last 10 years as Reach 2 as a chief exec has been the most challenging and the most rewarding part of my career. But I've left to pursue two great passions of mine. The first is travel, because it really does broaden the mind and it really does enrich the soul. And I feel like after 10 relentless years, that's something which I need right now. But also, professionally, I want to use the knowledge, the skills, the experience I've had to help people who are currently in the role, thinking of getting into the role, or in another senior position in a trust. Because in a sector that's about learning, I want to make sure that any learning I've got is passed on. And it's a sector, of course, which I'm passionate about, and we're all passionate about. And what a privilege it is to have the opportunity to influence so many people's young lives, to have a positive impact on so many school communities. What a privilege it is to be the guardian of those who work for us, our leaders, our teachers, our support staff, to nurture them, to safeguard their well-being, guide their careers, help them when they're struggling, and celebrate with them when they're successful. But of course, with that privilege comes great responsibility. A responsibility to be the very best leaders that we can for those that follow us. A responsibility to create the greatest schools that we can for our children to learn in, our staff to work in, and our communities to turn to when they need us. And finally, a responsibility to clear away all the problems that get in the way of that. And therein, of course, lies the rub. Because this job is tough, and as we've been hearing already, the challenges are acute. We held a round table a couple of weeks ago to talk about the cost of living crisis and the pressures on schools, and that, along with the report from our partners at the Key around what pressures schools are facing at the moment, it's clear that our context right now has never been more difficult. And I want to touch on 2 or 3 things that have not been mentioned already. Undoubtedly, pretty much everyone in this room and beyond is feeling the impact of the cost of living crisis. Whether that is rising energy prices, whether it's the cost of the fuel you're putting in your car, whether it's your shopping bill at Sainsbury's, inflation, rent increases, you name it. And to be honest, if the people in this room, including me, are feeling it, imagine the impact on those in the most disadvantaged areas. Imagine the impact on those who are vulnerable, because they are the very families that most of us serve. Add to this what I think is a very, very real health and well-being crisis amongst people, and in particular amongst young people. And I was really sad last week, which was Suicide Awareness Week, to read just how many people, young people, had taken their lives last year because they found nowhere else to go. And also to read how all the helplines are just swamped with people looking for help, for support. And my own personal example of that, I was really quite shocked to find out that even at Reach 2 last year, calls to our employee assistance program increased tenfold in 1 year. And imagine, we're probably the families best placed to cope with this. So if it's like that for us, how is it for those that we serve? On a macro level, of course, there's the political uncertainty and turmoil that we are experiencing at present, which not only impacts on us personally, but professionally. How many secretaries of state have we had in how many weeks? Almost farcical. Let me tell you, my favourite being the Secretary of State appointed at the start of the summer holidays and replaced in September. What a tough gig. And on the theme of politics, my view is the same as the rest of Forum strategy. The government's white paper, the DfE's policies do not yet fully cover the challenges that we are facing. And also are not addressing those issues that are going to face us in the incoming years. Let's think about likely economic and labour market changes. Let's think about sustainability issues. Let's think about climate change. So far, no strategies to really help us address that. And my view is there is a ticking time bomb for us as trust leaders, and that is to do with the need for a once-in-a-generation investment in the school estate. Because how many of us are facing issues where our schools are not fit for purpose, where they're not the kind of environments that we need our children to be learning and growing up in. I was having discussions with this with Lord Nash 8 years ago, and nothing has changed. And this is still a really big challenge for us. Finally, before I really depress us all, I can see from your face, before I really depress us all, there is a real need to herald in a new era of respect for this profession. Because we need a strong dialogue with government about these challenges. We need to stop being treated as a political football, and we need to be given the respect that we deserve. And all of these are challenges which we are facing. Nowhere should we have the disrespect of the curveball that we had during the summer around people's pay and us not being able to meet it. That's disrespectful. So we need to herald a new era of a relationship with government. I am teasing you, of course, about depressing you all. It's not my intent. But we must be realistic about the challenges that are facing, because if we're not realistic about them, our response cannot be commensurate and it cannot be robust enough. So we do need to be we do need to be realistic about it. But, and here's where it gets a bit lighter. Colleagues, I can speak to you honestly when I say I am not depressed or disheartened at all about the journey that lies ahead. Those of you who are my friends in this room are not allowed to shout out, that's not because you're doing the job anymore. You're not allowed to say that, Wayne. I can see you thinking it. Yes, indeed. It's not because that was all. Let me say it again. I am not feeling disheartened or depressed about this. Quite the opposite. I feel invigorated and I feel confident. And if I'm asked the question, why do you feel that? Well, it's the theme of our conference today. Because I have hope. I want to use the rest of this speech to talk about why hope is so important and, more to the point, why the hope I have is well-founded. And as you've heard from Maggie and you've heard from Alice, there are many definitions of the concept, virtue, characteristic of hope. And as Alice said, it probably means lots of different things to all of us. I think I really first came upon the concept through my love of reading and my fascination for Greek mythology. I wanted to be mighty Zeus and defeat all the Titans. No delusions of grandeur there. And a particular favourite story of mine was Prometheus stealing Zeus's fire. For those of you who have forgotten the legend, Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus were titans, but pledged their loyalty to Zeus because they recognized his power. As a reward, Zeus promised that they could mold the earth and that they could create man. And Epimetheus formed all the animals, and he recognized that each of them would need something to protect them. So he gave them those qualities. Prometheus went a bit slower in creating man, and then after this realized he'd got nothing left to protect them because Epimetheus had given them all away to the animals. So he asked Zeus if he could let them have fire. Zeus refused. Fire was only for the gods. And so Prometheus ignored him and stole fire and gave it away anyway. For this, Prometheus was punished, as you probably all know, by Zeus in a rather horrible way. He was chained to a mountain, his shirt was stripped off, and he was attacked each evening by the eagles who was ripping out his liver. Nice. As you know, the liver regenerates, and so that constantly happened day in, day out for poor old Prometheus, who eventually was rescued. But Zeus wasn't believing that man had been punished for this, and so therefore looked to increase the way in which he could make both Prometheus and man suffer. And so he created a woman. He created Pandora, who was the most beautiful woman that had ever been created and was given all the virtues of beauty, honesty, kindness, tenderness. And he invited Epimetheus to marry, which he did, despite Prometheus's warning. Now, she was beautiful. She had many, many virtues. The sting in the tail was that Zeus made her curious. And as a wedding present, Zeus gave both to Pandora and Epimetheus a gold shiny box, Pandora's box, with the instruction never to open it. Of course, created curious, Pandora did open the box. Out of it flew horrible things: greed, envy, hatred, pain, poverty, war. All of life's miseries had been let out into the world. As quick as she could, Pandora slammed the box lid closed. And the last thing remaining inside of it, as you will know, is hope. And ever since, according to the legends, humans have been able to hold on to this hope in order to survive the wickedness that Pandora had let out. Now, I'm not suggesting that the challenges that I've been talking about are anywhere near what was let out of Pandora's box. However, what I do love about this story is it exemplifies that hope is the antidote, if you like. It is the defense, it's the weapon against feeling overwhelmed by all the difficult bad stuff. As we've heard from Alice, there are other more clinical definitions of what hope is: a feeling of or expectation and a desire for a particular thing to happen, or variations of this. So more an emphasis on looking forward to the future and a more desirable future. And many people have used this idea. One of my favorites is Barack Obama. Hope is that thing inside of us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it and to work for it and to fight for it. And it's here I agree, along with Maggie, that we start to get to some kind of understanding that actually hope in itself is not enough. It needs to be accompanied by action, by deeds, by hard work, and even metaphorically, by fighting. But it's in this final definition of hope that leads me to believe that as trust leaders, you will lead us to this better future. And that is, hope is to want something to happen and have a good reason to think it will. A good reason to think it will. And I have a really good reason to think that all of you in this room can deliver this better future. Why? It's really rather simple. You've just done it. You're still doing it. And you'll carry on doing it. The way in which, as a sector, as a network, as individuals, you have all come together to have tackled some of the most complex, the most challenging, the most heartbreaking problems facing our schools and their communities over the last few years leaves me in no doubt that my hope is well-founded. Let's explore this a little bit more. The pandemic, I think, and our ongoing challenges have facilitated some fairly seismic shifts in our sectors and in the way in which we are. I want to explore three of them. And in doing and exploring these three, I want us to note some pretty remarkable achievements that are at the heart of why I say our hope is well-founded. Firstly, we have begun to break down the artificial barriers, the legal constructs, the insular mindsets that have been a factor and a feature of our educational landscape for too long. At last, we've begun to collaborate, to network, to cooperate more than ever, and understand that we are all stronger and better as a result of sharing our knowledge, our expertise, our resources, and even at times ourselves as leaders. What have we done? We have open sourced ourselves to each other. We have put aside personal and trust agendas and egos and committed ourselves to the common good. The results have been and will continue to be phenomenal. We have collectively survived, not without hurt, not without loss, of course, a pandemic. We are now working hard to find solutions to the challenges of austerity, political turmoil, financial hardship, all the things I've just talked about. But that, of course, is hopeful leadership. That's what we are doing. And despite all of this, here we are together again today, talking about the future, talking about what more we can do to our families and our communities. And those past challenges, if you're anything like me, are exactly that. They're past. And we are ready to take what we've collectively learned and apply it to solving our next set of problems. And that gives me hope. The next seismic shift, and I think it's probably the biggest, is our ability to innovate, to change our ways of working, to be creative and solve problems we didn't even know existed. We can now believe, I think, much more in the art of the possible. The challenges we have faced and overcome, I think, have pushed us in directions we didn't even know we should be going in. But what it has done, I think, has shown us our true potential. And let's just take a moment to reflect on just two of these accomplishments. Firstly, pretty much a digital transformation has taken place. Challenged by necessity, of course, but we have rethought traditional models of teaching and learning. We've moved to a hybrid model of blended learning, online, in-classroom learning with astonishing speed. We upskilled ourselves and our staff to new ways of working. We rewrote curriculums to make sure that we're meeting the changing needs of our children and our young people. And we solved the logistical problem of multi-site schooling. Now, of course, all of this was supported by the government putting their hands in their pockets. But that's not the point. The essential problem of how to school pupils in extraordinary circumstances was solved by the sector working together and finding collective solutions. And now that a degree of normality, if we can call it that, has returned to our schools, look how well we have all put provision in place to support those pupils who've had their learning disrupted, or who perhaps have fared less well. Look how well we have put support in place, emotional support, to support the most vulnerable, to help them continue to thrive and learn. This is a sector who are experts in what we do. Look at the way in which our working practices changed, and our realization that we could do things differently if we challenged traditional norms. And the realization that this could have a massive impact of some complex issues that we have been grappling with for quite a long time. Those issues such as organizational efficiency, such as environmental sustainability. As an example, my last year has reached two through our teams and staff working differently across the organization. We knocked £1 million off a travel budget by working differently. Now imagine the good that that can do if we apply those resources to the things that are really challenging and facing us now. Money that can be spent addressing those challenges. And just think about the reduction on our environmental footprint in believing that we can work differently. But it's because of this proven ability to innovate, to be creative in finding solutions, that I once again can say how confident I am in this hopeful future. I think the final seismic shift, which I will touch on briefly because I could write a book on it, and there are far too many people in this room who have written books far better than I could. And it's a couple of things I've covered in the blogs recently. But I think it's probably less of a seismic shift and more a forceful reminder that schools are at the very heart of their communities. And when times are tough, we are who people turn to. We are civic leaders, and our role goes beyond that of only educating pupils. And I think in the communities that we serve, we are the mainstay for our families. They turn to us in times of need. They look to us to help solve their problems. And why this invigorates, excites me, is that what an opportunity to make even more of a difference we now have. That saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, is true. Times are tough, and it's time for us to get going. In my blog about the masterclass of leadership that Her Majesty the Queen gave us, I talk about her being a constant in people's lives, and how in times of instability, in times of trouble, it's really important to have a constant in your life. And I just want to remind everyone, myself included, that we are the constant for our school communities. And in these most challenging of times, we need to be at our very best in order to be as supportive to them as we can. And I'm challenging chief execs as I'm working with them and asking them the question, is what matters to your families what matters to you? How closely what you are doing in your trusts, in your schools, is it aligned to what your families, your children, and your communities need? So, at the start of the speech, post-depressing you, I talked about actually being invigorated And I talked about being confident because of the hope that I've got. And I hope that just by sharing 2 or 3 examples why the collective belief in the power of connection, a collective belief in the power of community, the collective belief in stronger we are together we are stronger is the way forward for us. Christopher Reeve, aka Superman, who I think if it came into a battle between Superman and myself as Zeus, I'm not quite sure who would come out on top, but that's for another day. Christopher Reeve, as you know, went through a horrific accident that changed his life. And he once said, hope is a choice. And once you choose hope, anything is feasible. And connecting with what Maggie and with what Alice said earlier, it is a choice that we make. But he also developed what I like. He called them habits of hope. A concept later developed by others, and particularly who Maggie referred to. But it's an idea that really resonated with me, and it includes behaviors I consciously tried to adopt, both as a chief exec and as a person. And let me conclude by sharing 3 of them. And at the same time, can I ask you to reflect on how important they might be in your roles as the most senior people in your organizations, as the standard bearers of hope? Because for me, that's what you are as trust leaders. You are standard bearers of hope. The first one we've heard quite a bit about, and I think one of the strongest habits of hope is focusing on the opportunities, not just the restrictions of any situation. Not to be overwhelmed by the bad stuff that comes out of Pandora's box, but to want to use hope to seek the solution to it. And I was really heartened when I saw that the respondents of the cost of living survey had already highlighted positive outcomes out of that, even though they might have been unintended. So these challenging times we've been through have created innovation, have increased efficiency and sustainability. All these have been positively impacted. And last week at the round table, when we were talking about the financial pressures on schools at present, so many of you looking at creative and imaginative solutions that you could fix these problems with. So focusing on the fact that yes, life is hard, but actually we can find a way through this by focusing on what opportunity it gives us. And I think this idea that we've been working at, that hope is about belief and wish combined with action, is really what's about focusing on what opportunities give you hope and not just why you shouldn't be hopeful. Alice mentioned glass half full or glass half empty. I'm not sure it was Alice or it was Maggie. Glass half full, glass half empty. The other habit of hope that I think is really important is cultivating optimism. So it is that old glass. Is it half full? Is it half empty? Are you going to find out how to fill it? An analogy I prefer to that is either being, and you will know it, the mood hoover or a radiator. I looked at that picture of the Queen. You know when she did that meeting before meeting Liz Truss, and if ever there's a time to be hopeful, that was it. Did you see her eyes sparkling? Did you see that smile? That picture was heartwarming, wasn't it? She radiated warmth and positivity. That's how we need to be. Cultivate that warmth. We need to heat up that room. And not be like what I think is one of the scariest things on this earth, which is a Harry Potter Dementor, that sucks the life, the happiness and the soul out of a room. So I ask you, are you the Queen full of cultivating optimism, or are you Dementor, sucking the life and joy out of everybody? There's quite a lot of research that shows that optimism actually does give you a better quality of life, that actually it gives you a better psychological state. And one of the things that I would, remind you is that if you are a leader asking people to go the extra mile through tough times, my belief is that by focusing on the positive, celebrating the gains, highlighting the opportunities, is the best way to give them hope and to motivate them into action. And third, and finally, which for me is probably one of the most important, and that is never underestimating the power of kindness. And I think kindness gives people hope. And it gives people hope because it reinforces the fact that essentially people are good and people want to make a difference. And I think as leaders and as a person, I feel great when someone does something for me that is kind. And I hope you feel the same when someone does it for you. I feel good when I am kind to someone because I believe in good karma, and that's what it does. And throughout the pandemic, through all of Reach 2, if you ask them what my mantra was, it was be kind. And it's one of those things which, given how influential we are in our role as trust leaders, that smallest bit of kindness can make the biggest difference. So, in summary, it's often been quoted to me that hope is not a strategy. Well, actually, I don't hold with that. And to my mind, hopeful leadership, based on the understanding we have now of it, which is a wish, a desire, an expectation of a better future, delivered through our actions, is exactly where we should be right now. And exactly what is going to see us through the next few years. And I ask that you all be hopeful leaders. And I'm going to leave you with Charles Dickens, who says, and it is really relevant to what we've achieved and where we are right now, but he says, it's always something to know that you've done the most you could. But don't leave off hoping, or it's no use doing anything. Hope. Hope to the last. Thank you for listening to me this morning.